Welcome to the Resource Nexus podcast. As always, you can check out the full article along with stats and opinions at theresourcenexus.com. It's time to weigh in on this. I don't particularly enjoy doing it because in many ways this should be a feel-good story. I've always been someone who roots for the little guy, especially as a former Division II athlete, and an underdog program rising to national attention is usually something worth celebrating, but in this case, the praise has gone too far. The Miami Redhawks men's basketball team is having a remarkable season, but they are not the team that deserves some of the accolades currently being attached to their name, like 19th in the AP poll or a top 5 or 6 seed projection by some. Not for this. The last undefeated team in Division I college basketball should be one of the biggest feel-good stories of the season. A program outside the power conferences running the table is usually something fans rally behind. Yet Miami's situation has produced a very different reaction. At 30-0, Miami, Ohio completed its regular season without a loss. I put that 30 in quotation marks. And keep in mind, 3 of those wins came against non-Division I opponents. On the surface, that sounds historic, and in some ways it is, because there has never been a team at their level to survive to 30 wins. Frankly, few have played this level of strength of schedule and survived this many close games. Yet, instead of universal praise, their resume has sparked widespread debate and skepticism across message boards, analytics circles, and national media discussions. Some talk shows have openly questioned whether the Redhawks belong anywhere near the top half of the NCAA Division I men's basketball tournament bracket, while others have floated the idea of them earning a number 6 seed or better. That contrast between the perfect record and the underlying metrics is exactly why the debate has become so intense. At the center of the conversation is a simple question. How much weight should an undefeated record carry when the schedule behind it ranks near the bottom of Division I? And the root of the debate is simple: an extremely weak schedule. The primary reason for the deserved skepticism is Miami's schedule. According to KenPom, the Redhawks finished the regular season with one of the weakest non-conference schedules in the country. Their out-of-conference strength of schedule ranked 360th out of 365 Division I teams, while their overall schedule ranked just 287th nationally. Miami also played 3 non-Division I opponents, further weakening the overall profile of their resume. Outside of conference play, the Redhawks faced only one opponent ranked inside the top 250 of KenPom's rankings. Their most notable non-conference win came against the 147th ranked Wright State Raiders men's basketball team, a solid Horizon League program, but hardly the type of opponent that typically builds or demands serious respect. For a team being discussed as a potential single-digit seed, the absence of quality wins stands out dramatically. Let's talk about Miami's defense, or rather why power programs wouldn't schedule them. Supporters argue that the weak schedule wasn't entirely the program's fault. The Redhawks have publicly stated that they attempted to schedule several high-profile opponents, but were turned down. Emails obtained through open records request reportedly show the program contacted numerous power conference teams while building their non-conference slate. Among the programs they reached out to were Pittsburgh, Wisconsin, Marquette, USC, Oregon, Ohio State, Florida, and Mississippi State. Additional programs reportedly responded but never finalized games, including Michigan State, UCLA, Boise State, Grand Canyon, Kansas, BYU, Utah, Illinois, Virginia Tech, and Nebraska. On the surface, that sounds reasonable, but many of those outreach attempts were not straightforward offers. They often came with specific date demands. When you're a program trying to date up, flexibility matters, especially with scheduling windows. If stronger opponents weren't available on those exact dates, the logical move would have been to reshuffle the weaker parts of the schedule, including the Division II and other low-level opponents that ultimately remained More importantly, the argument itself isn't particularly convincing when you look at the broader landscape. There are dozens of power conference programs they could have also called, probably many more realistic ones. There were also opponents outside the power conferences, programs from leagues like the Mountain West, the Atlantic 10, and other strong mid-major conferences that regularly need games. Mountain West teams, for example, are regionally located where travel is feasible. Offer yourself as a guarantee game or a home and home. The gap between building a respectable mid-major schedule and the one Miami assembled is enormous. That raises a fair question. Was this simple scheduling incompetence or a deliberate decision to construct an extremely manageable slate where they could win a lot of games and run up the record? I tend to believe it's more the latter. Many of the outreach offers were likely lip service. Programs like Pittsburgh might have thought they could go and beat Miami, which historically happens all the time, but kicking the tires on terms and actually scheduling is different. Context matters, too. This was a team coming off a season ranked around 146th in the metrics and projected in the preseason roughly in the 130 range. Exactly the type of opponent many programs are comfortable scheduling. They were not so strong that opponents would fear an upset, nor so weak that playing them would harm computer rankings. In other words, they occupied the scheduling sweet spot that typically produces plenty of willing opponents. The usual excuses coaches give to defend weak schedules simply don't apply here. Someone would have scheduled them, or they simply didn't want to play a quality slate, or they were poor at constructing one. Even critics who acknowledge the scheduling challenge argue that Miami's final schedule still crossed an unusual line. There's a significant difference between missing out on power conference games and ending up with the 360th ranked non-conference schedule in the country. Many mid-major programs regularly arrange competitive games against similar level teams. Programs like High Point, UNC Wilmington, Liberty, Belmont, George Washington, Yale, Northern Iowa, George Mason, and Illinois State often participate in home-and-home series with other strong mid-majors, and it's no surprise these programs regularly produce top 100 seasons. Coming into the year, teams like High Point, Liberty, or UNC Wilmington were expected to perform well. UNCW, whose schedule is also weak, would have welcomed a meaningful home-and-home series. Instead, Miami traveled to North Carolina to face UNC Asheville, a far lower-rated opponent, rather than securing matchups with projected strong mid-majors. Similarly, rather than scheduling road games against Utah State, New Mexico, or Colorado State, the Red Hawks opted for easier opponents like Air Force. If the goal was genuinely to schedule better competition, it was entirely possible. The only plausible explanations for such a weak slate are either scheduling incompetence or a deliberate choice to keep the schedule manageable. Why not offer one of the better Mountain West teams a guarantee game, or a home-and-home with UNCW or High Point? Clearly, travel to these states is feasible, and there are top mid-major teams available. And it's not just the opponents. It's how Miami has played them. For a team that has faced one of the weakest schedules in Division I basketball, the Red Hawks have survived an unusually high number of tight games. They needed overtime or last possession wins multiple times against opponents ranked far outside the national elite. Some of the closest calls include 90-87 in overtime at UNC Asheville, ranked 303 in KenPom, 76-73 versus Akron, 63 in KenPom, 105-102 in overtime versus Buffalo, 192 in KenPom, 107-101 in overtime at Kent State, 153 in KenPom, 86-84 versus UMass, 198 in KenPom, 73-71 at Buffalo, 192 in KenPom, 69-67 at Western Michigan, 276 in KenPom, 74-72 versus Toledo, 144 in KenPom. That's 8 games decided by 3 points or fewer or in overtime, many against teams outside the national top 150, and several outside the top 250. When a team plays a schedule this week, there are typically two ways to build a convincing resume: play stronger opponents or overwhelm weaker ones with dominant margins. Miami has done neither. Instead, they frequently found themselves in coin flip games late in the second half. Winning all of them is impressive in its own way, but historically, it's extremely rare. Analytic systems are skeptical for a reason. According to KenPom, Miami ranks 12th nationally in luck, a statistic measuring how a team's actual record compares to expected results based on efficiency margins. Teams with unusually strong records in close games typically rank high in this category. Miami's season has included multiple narrow escapes, including several one-possession victories and overtime games. Winning close games is obviously part of basketball, but winning every single one across an entire season is extremely rare. Historically, teams that reach 30-0 are typically dominant national contenders, programs ranked inside the top 10 or top 20 in efficiency metrics. Miami's profile looks very different. They currently sit around 53rd in net rankings and 89th in KenPom, numbers far outside the range normally associated with undefeated teams deep into the season. The broader context of modern college basketball also matters. Over the last decade, conference realignment and the rise of super conferences have significantly increased the difficulty of league play in the Southeastern Conference, the Big 12, and the Big 10. Teams in these leagues now face an almost constant stream of top-tier opponents. Many top 40 teams today are playing schedules comparable to the toughest schedules in the country a decade ago. Against that backdrop, a team playing the 360th ranked non-conference schedule stands out even more dramatically. And that brings us to the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee's dilemma. If Miami wins the Mid-American Conference Tournament, the Redhawks will enter March Madness undefeated, something that naturally commands attention. That tension is exactly why the debate has become so heated. Some analysts argue that going 30-0 in Division I basketball deserves major respect regardless of schedule. I'm not in that camp. Others believe rewarding such a resume too heavily would send the wrong message about scheduling accountability. In truth, the reality probably lies somewhere in the middle. Miami deserves credit for winning every game on its schedule, something extremely difficult to accomplish in Division I basketball. This is one of the few examples a team of this middling level, roughly around 60th to 70th by average efficiency, has achieved. At the same time, it's fair to acknowledge that the schedule itself played a major role in making that undefeated run possible. If the Red Hawks had lost even one or two games, the entire national conversation would likely disappear. They would simply be viewed as a solid mid-major team that played a joke of a schedule and enjoyed a successful season. Instead, the undefeated record has pushed them into the national spotlight, forcing analysts and fans to confront a complicated question that college basketball rarely has to answer. How much should 30-0 really mean when the schedule behind it ranks near the bottom of the sport? That question will likely remain unresolved until the NCAA tournament begins, when Miami finally faces the level of competition their resume has largely avoided all season. I don't believe they should be heavily rewarded for their undefeated record. A double-digit seed is completely fair under these circumstances, even if they enter the tournament undefeated. If they were to lose in the conference tournament, they would likely only receive a gift bid for the storyline, one of the last 4 spots in the field, and would probably be beaten handily in the first round, or at best advance with a fluke upset. This is not the 19th best team in the country, despite what the AP poll suggests. Alright, that's a wrap for today. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you got some good insights. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who'd find it useful. And don't forget to check out the resourcenexus.com for more in-depth analysis. Until next time, check you later.
Cool. Guess we'll see you around.
All right, check you later.
Bye.
Wait, man, why are you always such a dork, man?
What are you talking
Check you
about?
later. Check you later.